path, in order to see something from a grander perspective, the next thing we're able to do, we're able to look at, is to basically ask the question, okay, now that I'm free from all of these things, what am I going to be free for, right? What am I going to be free for? And so as we delve into this question, my friends, we're going to go to we're hopefully going to hit up on some topics that are pretty universal. And I also want, of course, as always, open it up to, if people have questions, feel free to put it in the chat or to request to be unmuted, and hopefully that will be able to be arranged, okay? So once we are free from that which is holding us back, again, whether externally or all sorts of emotions or things that are pulling us in one direction or another, the next move is to say, okay, so like now that I'm free from all these things that are holding me back, and I see myself, above all these different things, hopefully, that have been pulling me down. So, okay, now my question is, what do I want to do with my life, right? What direction do I want to start moving towards, right? And so usually what comes up for people is, okay, what do I desire, right? And so let's get into that a little bit, right? And let's talk about, moving towards where we desire, right? And it's a funny thing when we talk about this idea of going towards where we desire, or towards happiness, joy, all that kind of stuff. So society has kind of given us some misconceptions, right? Misconceptions about joy, right? So number one, I think, is that society has put in our mind that joy, our level of joy, is a dependent, right? That it's dependent on how much stuff you have, on if only, and they put in the back of our mind that if only I had that guy, if only I had that gal, if only I had that job, if only I had that six-figure income, if only I had that car, if only I had those looks, if only I had that life, then I'd be happy, right? But what happens when imagine you get something big, right? Imagine you win the lottery, right? So even the psychologists will tell us that maximum, that high will last for a maximum of 6 weeks. Then you come down from that high and you're back in your same emotional state before, the same emotional state like you had before, just now you have more money, right? So of course, most of us are like, hey, I'd love to try that, right? But what we see from this is that our level of joy has nothing to do, or very little to do, with what we're intaking, with what we're getting, and much more to do with what we're putting forth, what we're putting out there, what we're giving forth of ourselves, right? That yes, there is a certain amount of food, water, companionship that I need in order to get by, but that's survival. That's not thriving, right? Real thriving is going to have nothing to do with what I'm intaking, or very little to do with what I'm intaking, and much more with what I'm putting out there, right? So like an example, the studies that have been done, at least in America, are that when they talk about like, does money affect your joy, right? So the truth is that in America, we find that up till $75,000, the standard is, the average is up to $75,000. Yes, it does. After that, it has no effect whatsoever. What's the difference? Why? What's 75? Because that's when people, I guess, your average Joe in America feels like really like comfortable, right? So like, okay, all my needs are met. I don't have to be running, chasing my tail in order to pay rent and keep the lights on. And then after that, though, once we get past that to a certain level of comfort, I can kind of basically do what I want to do and live comfortably. So then past that, you can have 100,000, you can have a million, you can have 100 million. That the effect on happiness is either very, very minimal or basically nothing, right? Because what it means to say is that, like, okay, yeah, if I feel constricted in this certain way, that maybe is going to by having more money, I relieve that stress. Okay, in terms of that there's an effect. But when we're talking about real joy and fulfillment, so then money, so it's not about what you're intaking, it's about who are you being. It's about how are you living. Am I living out the reality? So let's get into that a little bit, right? So if we see that joy, if we see that what it comes out really is that joy isn't about what's coming onto us, but what we're intaking. Much better way to express it is that what we mean by joy is that joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are, right? Let's say that one more time. That joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are, right? And that means on all levels: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. And right, so it's kind of like, imagine you have a seed, right? And that means to say that the seed includes the entire story of the tree in it already, but in the state of potential. And the quote unquote yearning of any seed is to grow into the fullest fruition of what it already is inside, right? In a very similar way, the Torah itself refers to people as trees in a certain place, right? And so it means to say that we have a certain kind of fruition, a potential, that what we're really after at our core is growing and expressing this forward, right? Also, the Maharal of Prague explains that when the Torah talks about the people being like a tree, so he says, yeah, it's a tree, but that's just, the tree has its root in the ground and then grows up. But the human being has its root upstairs, has its root in Shamayim, in the heavens, right? The soul is beyond, and then grows forth, expresses itself forth down in this world, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later, right? And so what we mean, though, is that there's a certain level of, again, let's say it one more time, joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are, right? So if we want to look at how that applies, let's see how that's true. We can see how that's true when we look at how it shows up on all levels. Let's start with on the physical, right? If a person wants to express their physical potential, bring out their physical potential in this world, so where do they go? I'll leave that to you guys. Someone chime in so that I feel like I'm talking to actual human beings. Or not? Okay. So if a person wants to bring out their physical potential, so you go to the weight room, right? You go to the gym, right? Because what's happening over there, right? A person goes ahead and brings forth their capacity, the potential of their body into fuller expression, right? Now, when we go ahead and do that, by the way, is that necessarily comfortable, right? Not necessarily comfortable, right? We're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's recognize that that's what's going on. When a person goes ahead and does that, so they start to feel a little bit more like they're a fuller version of themselves, right? Let's look at it emotionally / psychologically, right? Imagine you have a person who has a certain dream, right? Let's say you have a person who wants to be that Super Bowl quarterback, right? So a person, imagine they grow up. Hey, there you go. Imagine a person grows up and it's 7 years old. They start playing football. They start tossing it around, and they have a certain dream, like, oh, this guy, he's got a little bit of innate skill, awesome. And then he makes the team in high school, and then by the time he's senior year, this guy, he's a star quarterback for his high school team. He's getting looked at by different colleges, and sure enough, one of the colleges recruit him. He's doing well. He leaves to the NFL draft. He gets in. They take him a few years in. We find him a few years into his career. We catch up with him. And here he is. He's at the Super Bowl. And there's 2 minutes left to go. And he's driving. His team's down by 4. He drives his team down the field, right? And then with time expiring, he throws an over-the-shoulder touchdown pass. Crowd goes wild. Can you hear the idea that in that moment, we love that moment, right? Because that moment is ecstasy, right? Because what's going on here was the entire time it's a build up. He has a certain vision, he has a certain potential, and that moment is the moment when that potential turns into actual, when that capacity is brought into fruition. And so as human beings, we love that feeling, we love that moment. Right? I'll give you another example. Imagine you have a mountain climber, right? And this guy, he climbs all the way to the top of the mountain, right? Now, in the movie, you see the entire build up to it, but then at the last moment, he's right at the top, and that's when the movie comes on. It goes slow motion, dun, 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 and he comes to the top of the mountain. And as he climbs over, right, as he climbs over to the top, he climbs that onto the top of the mountain, right? That's the part they focus in on. That's the part they make a big deal about, right? Why? Why do they zero in on that moment? Because that moment, he goes ahead, he takes out the flag, he plants it on the top, right? That moment is the moment where potential meets actualization, where journey meets destination, where the process meets the experience, right? That feeling of just getting there, that is what we love. That is, for many people, what they live for, especially if they're focused in on this kind of living, right? Why? Because that is that moment when potential meets actualization. And we love that as people. And we're going to discuss why we love that as people. But let's recognize that that's how we're working, right? That what we mean by joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are. Bringing your inner personal potential into expression, manifestation, and actualization. We love that, right? And that's why if the same mountain climber, if he was at the beginning of the climb, and imagine it's going to be a month, it's estimated to be a month-long climb. And a week into the climb, this guy, it's a hot day, it's hot outside, and the guy's a week into the climb. And imagine his best friend comes by with a helicopter and sees his buddy on the mountain over there. And he calls out to his buddy, hey, where are you going? And so the guy on the mountain responds, well, what does it look like I'm doing? I'm going to the top of the mountain. The guy says, listen, if that's your goal is to get to the top of the mountain, check this out. I got a helicopter here. Hop in. It looks like you got 3 weeks left on the climb. I'll get you there in 10 minutes. So what does the climber say to the helicopter driver, flyer? He says, no, thanks. Because the mountain climber made a mistake. His goal isn't just to get to the top of the mountain. His goal is to climb to the top of the mountain, right? The goal is the process, and this is also the way we bring that joy of the end, of the destination, into the journey and into the process, is when we recognize and see the process as part of the goal, right? And so when we go ahead and are involved in the process of living out the reality of who we are, right? So in that process, we can start to feel already in a certain level of an expansion of self, right? To the extent I'm living, right? And so this is the idea, as if we're looking for happiness, joy in our lives, one of the ideas is that once we have freed ourselves from different things that are pulling us away from the person we want to be, so then when we gain a certain mastery over our emotions and mastery over our physical desires, and we're able to say, okay, hold on a second, I can feel all this stuff coming up for me and trying to pull me in one direction or another, but I take a step back from that and I'm like, okay, but you know what, who do I want to be? What direction do I want to go in? That's when I can go ahead and start saying, okay, so those things don't own me anymore. So now, really, which direction do I want to go in? And so you start asking hopefully even bigger questions, right? Which is, okay, so what is reality in the world? What is truth in the world? What's worth pursuing? What's worth spending my time in? What's worth putting my effort into? The whole world is, occupied with all sorts of different pursuits, right? Some of them good, some of them not as good. They're making big deals about oftentimes very small things. And so, okay, I have one life to live, at least in this incarnation. So what do I want to spend my time in, right? And so when I access a certain place of inner freedom, so then I can say, okay, what place do I want to go to? What direction do I want to lead my life in? What kind of choices do I want to make, right? And as we go ahead and start to really focus in a more serious way about those things, so to the extent we start to not only clarify what is reality and what's my place in it, but then we go ahead and actually make some choices towards it, we start living a little bit in that direction, then we start to feel a certain level of expansion of self. Then we start to feel a certain level of fullness. Then we start to feel a certain level of living in alignment with that which is meaningful. And that's when we start to feel joy, right? Because you don't have to wait till the end. You don't even have to wait till your vision of what success is to happen in order to start feeling joy, right? Because that, when a person lives like that, so that's already you're going into perfectionism. You don't want to go that route. That's being extreme about it, right? That doesn't work and that's not healthy because results aren't always 100% in your hands. What is in your hands? Am I moving in the direction that I want to be moving in, right? So am I always going to be success? No, we don't do success. That's God. God does results. We don't do results, right? So what is success then? Success then is, am I making my choice in the best way possible, right? Am I making my choice, that which is in my hands, that which is in my control, am I going ahead and living to the extent I can, right? So I put in my effort, God does results. And that's already, the truth is that's already success, because you can't on a personal level, you can't judge success based on something that's not in your hands, right? And so to the extent we go ahead and we work on ourselves and live out being the reality who we want to be, so we're going to start to feel a certain level of fullness and a certain level of expansive self. So before we go on, questions, thoughts, ideas, anything anybody wants to share, please feel free to chime in. Go. A hush comes over the crowd. Okay. I shall. So the idea is like this. There's a flip side to everything we just said, right? And that is, if we're talking about joy, if we're talking about happiness, if we're talking about feeling all those wonderful, good feelings. So the next question, we can also look at the other side of it, right? Meaning to say, if we want to say that joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are, so then let me ask you guys, what do we mean by depression, or better yet, sadness? And anytime if I use the word depression here, I don't mean some kind of clinical diagnosis, right? That's not what I'm talking about here, right? What we're talking about here is the feelings of depression, the epidemic of feelings of depression that our time is subjugated with, right? Because, if you think about it, if you were to go back in time, if you were to go back 300 years, and you were to show the people there what we have now with running water, electricity, modes of transportation, these funky gadgets we're speaking on right now. If you were to show them all this stuff that we have now, they would be like, oh my God, you guys live in utopia. It must be that everyone there is blissfully happy all the time. And then you get here, and it's not like that. Matter of fact, not only is it not like that, there's an epidemic of feelings of sadness and depression that's out there. And so we have to ask the question, where does that come from? Why is that? Because most of us would have thought it would be the opposite, right? And so that takes us back to the question, which is, okay, what do we mean by sadness and where does it come from? And so I think it's very clear in accordance with everything we said thus far. Because so far we said that joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are. So let's take this to this next logical step. If joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are, so then depression is the experience of not actualizing the reality of who you are, of not going in your path or in the path of reality, right? Or now that could be because you don't know which way to go. Or it could be that you know very clearly which way to go, but for some reason you constantly find yourself running in the opposite direction, right? But it comes from, like someone put up there a minute ago, that it comes from that a certain emptiness in terms of moving in this direction, which is a wild thing, right? And so here the thing is, society has messed us up again with their misconceptions that they put in the back of our minds. Because number two misconception of joy for today that we've been given is that they say that they told us that, listen, the joy, the biggest path to joy is if it feels good, do it, right? If it feels good, do it. However, if it feels good, do it comes along with an implication, right? So if it feels good, do it, right? If it doesn't feel good, then don't do it. So think about it. This is what happens with people, right? If it feels good, do it. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. So here's what happens to your average American, right? Or Westerner, I should say. So your average Westerner gets 20 minutes of free time. So you tell me, what do they do with, as soon as, what's the gut response? As soon as the 20 minutes of free time begins, what is the person doing? We're going to speak about that exact phrase in a second. Very good. So what does a person do? They go immediately to the phone, right? Maybe they put on their latest, the latest show that they're into, right? Or back in the day, it would mean plopping in your couch and picking up the remote, start flipping through the channels, right? So how long though, right? Imagine a person starts flipping through the channels and they settled in on like MTV or something, you know what I mean? Some reality show, whatever it is, right? And how long before that person starts to feel a little bit like they want to blow their brains out, right? It might take a few minutes, might take a few hours. Truth is, the bigger the soul, the quicker they feel that way. But how did that happen? I thought they were, you know, getting more joy. So here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? Because let's take this to its logical outcome for a second, right? Think about it. When are you more comfortable than when you're plopped in your couch? When you're lying in bed, right? When you're asleep in bed. And when are you even more at peace than when you're asleep? When you're dead, right? I knew someone who was thinking that, just nobody types in for. So think about it. Can you hear the idea that society has put in the back of our mind that the path to joy is to get in touch with the thing that touches the thing that touches death, right? Comfort, sleep, death, right? Even the Talmud itself says that sleep is 1/60th of death, meaning to say sleep has a little bit of the flavor of death. All I'm adding here is that comfort is 1/60th of sleep. A certain flavor of sleep in comfort, right? But that means then that comfort is 1/360th of death. So what does that mean? That comfort's always bad, that sleep is always bad? No, it's work. There's a certain level, up to a certain point, it's something that is nourishing. But then go past that, and now it's bringing death in your life. It's taking away from your life's energy, which is all about, again, living out your potential into actualization, living out the reality of who you are, right? Like someone posted before, killing time. That's what people do, which is a crazy idea. Think about it. So imagine you kill time, right? Imagine you're killing time and constantly, every time you get a free moment, you're popping onto the phone to whatever. To do. Sometimes, by the way, sometimes the phone is a useful tool. Don't get me wrong. We're using it for a useful tool right now. But sometimes it's not about growth and expression of self in a positive way. Sometimes it's just about killing time, isn't it? And so think about it though. How many moments in time must you kill before you start to feel a little bit dead inside? Right? How many moments in time must you kill before you start to feel like a dead man walking? Right? And so you go over, you walk over, and you feel your pulse, and you're like, I don't know, it says I'm alive, but I feel totally dead inside. Right? And this is the epidemic of our time. Again, of course, I'm not talking about people who have some kind of clinical, medical, issue with depression, whatever extreme case. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the epidemic of depression that we all feel. Right? And if you're the 1% exception to that, so then everyone you know feels. Right? This is what it's coming from. Right? And so we should understand, I'm going to answer the question. I saw someone ask a question and check it out in a minute, but we should understand why it is that we feel this way, right? Because up to now, okay, up to everything we said so far, okay, we could have had some self-help guru or something could come on and say everything we've said so far, the truth is, right? But if we want to make this get a little bit more, take this to the next level, right? Get a little bit soulful about it, Jewish about it, we want to ask the question, hold on a second though. Okay, all this is true, but why do we work this way? Right? Because you give a whole speech about this is how we work and this is how people are. And so here's what you should do and get up off your behind and go ahead and figure out your passion and go live it. And that's all good and wonderful. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we want to go here is a little bit deeper and say, hold on, why is it that we work this way? Why is it that joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are? Where does that come from? Why is it that we work this way? Why is it that my emotions and my psychology and all my stuff is wrapped up in this concept? But before we deal with that question, let's check out the chats. Hold on a second, I have to find them. Okay. Okay, so there you go. So someone asked, what about wanting to unwind? Is that killing time? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Good, good. Thanks for filling up the chat here. Right then. By 200 years ago. Truth, truth, truth. Okay, good. So let's just deal with that last one, right? So if a person wants to unwind, unwinding is good and necessary, right? But again, like we said, there's a line, right? Let's just think about it in terms of sleep, right? Person needs a certain amount of sleep in order to be operating at their peak level of performance. What is that amount? We have to play with that. We have to figure that out. But a person can certainly go overboard on that, right? A person can indulge in that. And matter of fact, that's well known that person's not feeling so good emotionally. That is something that can be either symptomatic or causative of that, right? Is sleeping all the time. Other people actually can't sleep because of that, but that's a separate story. So yeah, we have to find that right amount where we are. Firstly, there's sleep or comfort that's necessary in order for us to then operate at a peak performance. And then there's also a certain amount of taking care of ourselves and being nice to ourselves and kind to ourselves. There is also that. But then past that already, now we're talking already about, instead of you using sleep to recharge your battery, now we're talking about you making your life about the sleep. But then that's when we start to feel, these feelings, right? When we start moving away from our purpose and into what's comfortable and feels good from a lower level, right? Feels good from a higher level is good. Meaning living out my bigger purpose could feel good, right? So that kind of feel good is good, right? But the kind where we're chasing that stage of recharge, not so good, right? By the way, let's just recognize that society sells us on this whole idea as well. The culture around us, I mean, think about it. What is the picture of paradise that they have sold to us, right? What is the picture of paradise? Go ahead. Anyone want to put that in the chat? There you go. Beach with the pina colada. Exactly. There you are on a white sandy beach. And you got you have one of those drinks with the little umbrellas in it, right? Someone's maybe feeding you grapes, you know? And it's just like, I can just lie here and I don't even have to move. Ah, amazing. Heaven, right? Well, good news. If you just want to lie there and not move, so freaking you're going to love death. Let me tell you, because that's all you do. That's all your body, at least physically, that's all your body does. And so what we're sharing here is that they have sold us a picture of paradise that has a death attached to it. That's the crazy thing. Now, don't get me wrong. There is a time to go ahead and lie on the beach and do all of that. Yes, as part of self-care, as part of recharge, but that has its limit. At some point, there is that line, that red line, so to speak, that when you cross that line, now already it's not about recharge and filling up the tank. Now it's about overflowing the tank and making that what your life is spent doing. And as we start doing that, we're missing out on opportunities for going ahead, getting up and moving forward in life and living out our personal potential, right? Expressing the reality of who we are, living in alignment with truth and what's good in the world. All of those things we are passing up on opportunities for those things when we are focused in solely on whatever feels good in the moment, right? So who's with me so far? Can I get it? Yeah. We got one. Thank you. I only asked for one, I guess. All right. So next question. Hey. Next question that we spoke about is, okay, good. People are with me. Awesome. Thank God. So next question we wanted to ask here, though, is why is it that we work this way? Why is it that joy, yes, joy is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are. But why do we operate that way? Why is it that that's how we feel joy? All right. So here is the ticket. Here's the Jewish picture. The Jewish picture is like this, that what we are at our core is something called soul. And what we mean by soul, as defined in the Kabbalistic books, the Zohar, and many of the Hasidic books then quote the Zohar, is that we are a chelek eloka mima'al, a spark of godliness from above. But what does that mean, a spark of godliness from above? It neglects to tell you the second half of it. The spark of godliness from above, down here, meaning that the idea is that we have a soul, a spiritual soul, godly soul here in this physical world. And the purpose of that soul is to live out a little bit of godliness and goodliness here in this physical world where God and good is not all that clear, right? To live out all of these spiritual concepts and godly ways in a place which seems to stand in contrast with it for the purpose of shining, bringing out light and revealing the inherent light here that's hidden here in this physical world of contrast. Do you hear that idea, right? What does that mean to say? That means that literally we are created to live out and express an inner sublime potential into expression and into actualization here in this physical world. All right? Do you get what I'm saying here? That's literally, our feeling of joy is literally what we are are created for. That's how we're created to operate. That's totally in line with what a soul is. We are the aspect of Hashem that's designed to be expressing Hashemness here in what seems to be not Hashemness. Of course, really at its core, everything is with the will of God, and has godliness at its core. But the point is that we go ahead and live out and reveal godliness in this world, even in this world here, which seems to be non-godly, right? That's what holy joy is. And that's what, to a certain extent, that's also what a mitzvah, the holy joy of a mitzvah, right? That we should be excited and enthusiastic about bringing out godliness here in this world. And the way, of course, we do that, one way, of course, we do that is through mitzvot, right? Is through the mitzvah. And so let's understand, by the way, again, that this is why we work the way we work. This is why we love the underdog, right? You ever notice that? We love the story of the underdog, but whether it be a sports story, whether it just be a person getting a second chance at life, we love this story, right? Because what's the story of the underdog? Right? Let's use the sports team example, right? Imagine you have some team and they're just totally overmatched by other teams in the league, right? Other teams have more skill. Other teams they're bigger, they're stronger, whatever. But then this team decides, you know what, we are going to work hard. And at first they're losing. And so everyone's making, not only they're losing, but they're being made fun of by the other teams, but then they really pull themselves together, pick themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. And they're clawing their way and they start to go ahead and turn around their season. And sure enough, ultimately, they go ahead and they overcome, right? We love that story. Look at all the movies that are out there. We have movies that are sports movies. We also have movies that are action movies. What are movies that are action movies, right? You have one guy against the world, right? You have the, whatever it is. It could be the Rockies, the Rocky movies, right? Where here you have a person who maybe has less talent. He's not as big. He's not as strong, whatever. But then he manages to overcome. All those kind of movies that we have, the one man against the world, or the guy who's a secret agent, up against the bigger, grander system. All of these are examples. Even, by the way, the romantic comedies also, same story. The romantic comedies, the woman and the guy, they meet, and she's a single mom, and they're working in a company, and she's trying to hold down the fort, and she is trying to hold on to her job and also put her kid first, but the job keeps getting in the way. And then she's trying to keep this romance going because she's trying to find companionship. And she's trying to keep it all together. And then, something gets thrown in the mix that messes things up. And what is that all about? It's all about, can we go ahead and we have a certain vision for who we want to be, or in this case, who the couple wants to be. And can we go ahead and live it out, even in the context of contrast, even in the context of conflict, even where it seems like maybe couplehood is not going to be that which works out from this situation, right? So this is the story, right? It's also the story of the American dream. It's the same story. The American dream is the guy shows up with nothing to Ellis Island, and can the guy go ahead and go ahead and have a vision and go and build and take out a loan from somebody, and then hopefully build a successful business and make it into a chain, and then make it into an international. Wow, you have McDonald's, you have Coca-Cola. Right? We love these stories because it gets to our soul. Right? And this, by the way, why are people paying so much money for the same movie over and over again? It's the same freaking thing, right? It's the same Mission Impossible kind of movie, or what's his name? What are those movies called? That's the guy Jason Bourne. All those movies, it's all the same thing. Right? It's all the same thing, but they will continue to sell it to us, and we will continue to buy it because it's easier to pay 10, 15 bucks to watch someone else to pretend to really live life than to actually go ahead and do it ourselves. So we can go ahead and watch someone else do it get a little bit of the feeling of it without having to do it ourselves, right? And so based on this, they make millions and millions and millions of dollars off us, right? On the other hand, though, if we can go ahead and zero in on everything we're saying here, and exactly, that's exactly right. If we can go ahead, and we're actually going to talk about that next time. Next time we're going to talk about the concept of klipa and how that affects. But if we can go ahead and pull ourselves together, right, and focus in on what we're saying here, and really start to live life, right? So then you'll find when you really start to live life, you'll find that movies will just be a lot less interesting because you're going ahead and living out your personal potential. You're living out who you can be and what you're here to do, right? You're living in alignment with truth. You don't have to watch someone else be paid to pretend to be. Yeah. And so to the extent we begin on that path, and you don't have to get there. It's not about getting there. It's about having a vision, moving in that direction. And then already, if you're aligned with living in the path that you want to be living, already you're going to feel the good vibes of that end goal in the process of you doing it. Because when you're committed, when you're dedicated, and you're living in that manner, that's going to be something that you feel and live with every step of the way. So my friends, questions, thoughts, ideas before we wrap up here. All right then. Oh, 15 more chats. Hold on a second. Is this the Midrash of Souls? So I'm not going to get into the bread of shame stuff right now. Cool. Okay, my friends, any questions? No, we're good. So, okay, hope this is meaningful. Hope this is helpful. Hope it made some sense. Thank you for joining me, and see you again soon, God willing. Ciao, y'all.